Hello, and welcome to Refresh the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. Before we get started, I want to let you know we are presenting to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the First Peoples of our land, including the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, and Snoqualmie. With that, I can't wait to get started. I'm going to be presenting to you today alongside Caitlin Jones, who you guys will get to meet in just a minute. My name is Tara Velker, and I'm an Accessibility Program Manager here at Xbox. On our team, we're working to make everything as accessible as possible as we can in the gaming space at Microsoft. I've been working at Xbox for about 3 years now, but of course in gaming accessibility for a lot longer. And Caitlin, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, Tara. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Jones, and I'm also an Accessibility Program Manager on the Xbox Gaming Accessibility team. And I've been working in the adaptive hardware side of things in the gaming space for about 7 years now. I'm really excited to be here.
And I'm, of course, very excited to have Caitlin today because she really is the mastermind behind most of what we're going to be presenting today. Now, to kick off the agenda, we're first going to talk about the history of the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines, or as you'll frequently hear us call them, the XAGs. We'll next go into the feedback that we received after they launched and how that made us decide to make some updates. We'll go into the breakdown of everything that we changed and why, discuss a little bit of future plans, as well as tell you about our new testing program. Now, going back to the very beginning, how did it all begin? At Xbox, we have a mission of reaching 2 billion gamers, and of course, with that kind of number, approximately 250 million gamers will have disabilities. So we need to do everything we can to help everyone make their games more accessible. So we went and we launched the original Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. They were published in October of 2019, and it was a set of 23 best practices that detailed everything that you could do to help make your game more accessible to people with disabilities. And of course, this was developed in partnership with industry experts and members of the gaming and disability community. As it's always said, nothing about us without us. So that was a key part in getting this information together. And the other key thing was it was created by developers for developers. A lot of the accessibility information that existed was coming from consumer groups, nonprofits, or gamers with disabilities themselves, but didn't have information on development itself for our developers. And that's why we decided to release it. Of course, once it got out there, we started getting the feedback, and we have learned a lot since the original launch. First thing we learned is that we had some very unclear and confusing language. Sometimes it was terms that we knew or maybe assumed other people would know, but other people didn't understand. We also had the problem of on some of our guidelines being overly technical, but in other ones we were way too broad. Even worse, a lot of this had a lack of context. We may tell you what a guideline is, but not why you're doing it or how to do it correctly, and that really made it hard to follow. Even worse, you may not know how to follow, so you'd go to look for an example, but frequently there weren't any. We didn't have places we could point you to show you what it looks like when you follow the guideline well. Going forward, we had a lot of people who gave us feedback that they understand what the guideline was telling them to do, but they really didn't understand how to do it. We didn't have documentation on the API, system capabilities, or even what was available out there for you to reference to figure out how to literally put these guidelines to effect in your game. Of course, we also had unclear persona applications, so you may not understand who you're building it for. And really, since then, we have got a ton more information, both from the inclusive design team here at Microsoft and our own user research team on what works best for gamers with disabilities. With all of that information, we knew we had to make an update. On your screen now, you can see kind of a before and after view, and the biggest takeaway is that the after site has a lot more information. We've gone through and added details on goals, scoping questions to help you figure out if it's right for you and your product, key areas and examples so that you know what to watch out for and what it will look like once you implement it, as well as background and foundational information. We know that if you're just starting your accessibility journey, you may not have all of the required prerequisite knowledge to really understand what we're driving at. So we've done our best to incorporate as much of this as possible. Now I'm going to be tossing it back over to Caitlin, who's going to be doing a deep dive into all of the areas that we changed so that you can see the new refreshed Xbox accessibility guidelines. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Tara. The history of the ZAGs from the very beginning is such an important part of this journey that's led us to where we're at today. And thank you so much for going over all of the work and effort that's been put in since then. And, I think what you'll see as we start taking a closer look at these changes is there's quite a lot more content in this document now, as you mentioned. And the intent with that is to really give developers options on what kind of supporting or introductory information that they personally want to read or dive deeper into. For somebody who's been in the accessibility space for quite a while that's using this document, they may feel confident in just heading right into the implementation guidelines section. But for those who may be new to the space, if they do want to access a lot of more of these expanded and updated, improved sections that we've included in the V2 update, it's there. So with that being said, let's take a closer look at these changes, starting with the updated introduction. So one of the first things that somebody reading an individual ZAG will see is, of course, the introduction. And in the past, the introductions to each ZAG were very high level. And given the fact that, as Tara mentioned, there are 23 of them, that's a lot of different accessibility areas and topics to tackle. So helping developers have an easier time understanding not only the focus of each ZAG, but also the impact that a ZAG has on the real-life experience of players was something that we wanted to improve on. So we added a designated intent or goal statement and also expanded the overview section quite a bit. Here is an example that shows the intent or goal for ZAG 101, which covers text display. And we want developers to know that the goal of the guidelines in this ZAG is ultimately to provide guidance that helps ensure the readability of text is optimized for more players. And that entails looking at your game's text size, the text scaling, and style configuration options. So just by reading the goal statement alone, you should have a solid understanding of what content that you'll be finding in this ZAG. And then when it came to improving the overview, we know, as Tara mentioned, that not everyone has an opportunity to work with players with disabilities firsthand. And it may be difficult to understand the connection between a game having something like small text size and the impact that small text size actually has on perhaps a player with low vision. So in this updated overview section, we've added some of those contexts. So again, for ZAG 101 about text display, in the new overview, we mentioned things like how many people in the world actually have low vision and would benefit from accessible text display. And beyond that, also provide context to help developers understand that this work scales far beyond just the gaming and disability community, and that their efforts in making things accessible ultimately helps everyone. And we did this by calling out the fact that players in situational circumstances, like playing on a small screen or maybe a screen that has a lot of glare, even if the player doesn't have a visual disability, they would still benefit from the ability to optimize their text display. So when you invest in accessibility, you're really just creating a better experience for everyone. And further, we wanted to make sure that the overview included some insights on how inaccessible experiences related to this topic can cause barriers for players. So discussing at a high level, what areas of the game players may be getting blocked that the guidance in this ZAG, when followed, can help unblock. So with something like text display, it's possible that someone can be blocked from the get-go. If they can't visually discern what the text on menu item elements say in order to navigate to the start game button, the experience may essentially end right there for that player before it even starts. And we want these takeaways to be clear from the get-go. We realized that accessibility can be really complex, and we wanted to provide as much information for developers as we can to help them understand all of the moving parts of this before taking a closer look into the guidelines themselves if they desired to. So we also realized that every game is really different, and the core mechanics, goals, and interfaces can widely differ from one game to another. So in addition to having that contextual information on how you're helping individual players, we also wanted to make it easier for developers to determine which ZAGs are most relevant to their game in particular by providing this new section that has scoping questions. And the scoping questions are generally a yes/no prompted guide that lists various game elements that can be impacted by each ZAG. So for example, the scoping questions for ZAG 101 text display, it first prompts developers to think about whether or not the ability to read text is a requirement in their game, which most of the time the answer to that is likely going to be a yes in some capacity. But then it prompts developers to determine whether or not their game contains specific elements that are heavily reliant on reading the text display, like needing to navigate text-based menus. It asks if there's text in the heads-up display specifically, and it prompts developers to kind of review how their game portrays communication from non-player characters or from other players in the game. So if the game only provides text dialogue that's not actually narrated aloud by other players or the non-player characters at any point, and that text is really small, a player with low vision can totally miss out on those conversations and therefore may miss out on all of those important contexts that inform their gameplay that other players are getting. So essentially by running through the scoping questions for each ZAG and determining if the answer to any of these scoping questions is yes, my game totally has that element in it, then they know that this ZAG is going to be something that they should definitely prioritize. And obviously, we encourage developers to compare their game across all ZAGs, but in terms of helping developers navigate such a large document and assisting with a big question we often get, which is, where do I start? This hopefully is going to be something that makes that process a little bit easier. So here's just another example of the scoping questions for ZAG 105 audio customization. And the questions in this example include things like, is your game multiplayer? Or does it have non-player chatter or other in-game dialogue, which may seem unrelated to audio customization, but we know that for players who are deaf or hard of hearing, when they play games that allow communication with other players, those other in-game sounds like the background music or other effects may be competing or overpowering their ability to hear what other players in the game are saying to them. And they may want to customize the volume levels of distinct sounds in the game to tailor it to exactly what they want to hear most. Another new section in the ZAGs is the key areas to target section, which appears in some of the ZAGs where the guidelines apply to many different types of elements across the gameplay experience. And the key areas are to really outline as many potential places in a game that the elements relevant to the ZAG may be present. So for example, this slide shows the key areas to target for ZAG 101 text display. And essentially this list is a reminder to not forget about these areas that may be overlooked. So text and menu UIs, text that appears on screen during active gameplay, whether that's in the HUD or notifications and friend invites and things like that. So essentially for the ZAG, here are the areas you should search across your game when determining where the text display best practice guidance should be applied. And then there are example captures from games to further clarify exactly what is being referred to in the key area list for each item. So here you can see an example also from ZAG 101, but discussing text that appears on screen during active gameplay. We have a screenshot from Gears Tactics, which shows a ton of text that is on screen during the active gameplay, but they've also made awesome efforts to ensure that this text has accessible display. Another new section that can be found in certain ZAGs that cover topics that tend to be a bit more complex is the background and foundational information section. And this discusses basic principles or context that a developer may need to know in order to properly implement the guidelines in that ZAG. So for example, ZAG 106 provides best practice guidelines for screen narration, but without some foundational information on the components of screen narration, the guidelines themselves and how to best implement that narration may not make a ton of sense just yet for those that are newer to screen narration implementation. So the background and foundational information section in this XAG covers things like what elements do need to be narrated versus what elements shouldn't be narrated, and what language or information should be included in the narration itself. And to make this foundational information easier to consume, there are example diagrams provided of a real game, in this case Grounded, with labels overlaid on the UI that indicate what the term label refers to versus what the term value refers to in the context of implementing them for screen narration use. And this is in the hopes that this knowledge translation between a rather complex accessibility topic and the application of it to that developer's specific game becomes a lot easier by seeing the contents as they relate to a real example of a game, as opposed to just a block of text trying to describe this information. Next, I'll touch on some of the improvements we made to the guidelines themselves. And as Tara mentioned, we wanted to be sure that we acted on the feedback we were receiving from developers about some of the difficulties with clarity and interpretation of the guidelines. So some of the improvements included breaking down complex guidelines into more bite-sized pieces that are easier to tackle. Some guidelines have been improved or added onto based on feedback from our gaming and disability community, as well as the user research studies that have been conducted. And some have been updated to include new gaming interfaces that weren't addressed in the previous SAGs. So now we had things like guidance around mobile and VR experiences as well. And we're, of course, always looking for feedback on how we can make the guidance as clear and tangible as possible. So please reach out to our team with any feedback at all in regards to that. And then last but not least, I think the most exciting part of the XAG's update are the photo and video capture examples that supplement the guidelines. And these are intended to not only create more clarity about what a guideline is referring to, but also showcase games that have already done an awesome job of implementing features or mechanisms that the XAGs address in order to serve as a reference or a method of generating ideas for how this type of accessibility feature can be tailored to meet the needs of your specific game. So you can see in the example here, we have a guideline from XAG 109 on objective clarity in games. And the guideline essentially states that games should provide an option for players to enable waypoint markers, directional cues, or some type of hint. So when a player is stuck or lost in a game, they could utilize that tool to unblock themselves. And then we have two screenshots here from the Outer Worlds game itself, of both the settings menu UI, where you can clearly see how the game provided the option to enable waypoint markers to players, and then a screenshot of what the waypoint markers in the game actually look like. And we're hoping that these examples will be very helpful to developers as they go through their accessibility journey. So there's the overview of all of the awesome work that the team has done in making all of these updates to the XAGs, but it doesn't stop there, and Tara is going to talk about where we go from here and what other exciting new accessibility opportunities are coming down the pipeline for game developers.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And again, I can't stress enough that Caitlin put in so much effort. She was the lead on getting all of these awesome updates out. So, like, own it, girl, you win. But yes, where do we go next? What future work are we going to give Caitlin to continue her amazing journey? Well, one of the first things that we want to be able to work on is giving gamer-specific personas. And a lot of documentation that's out there for accessibility in tech, they don't always necessarily map easily to video games. And when you're trying to understand who you're building for, having that idea can really make a difference. So one of the things that we want to do is update the personas that are available so that people can get information specific to video games. Now, we're going to be going into our next section, but I wanted to take a moment and be like, what should you take away from our Xbox Adaptive Guidelines refresh? The first, if you are watching this and you want to go check them out, you can find them at aka.ms/XAGX or ZAGs. And of course, as Caitlin has said, we would love feedback. We're totally welcome to answer any of your questions. You can email us directly at the Xbox Accessibility Team at xaccess@microsoft.com. And of course, we are always looking for examples. If you in your game have done something amazing and you would like to showcase your example, please reach out to us and let us know. We need permission from the studio or publisher before we're able to incorporate all of these awesome examples into our guidelines. So please reach out, let us know that we can use the example from your title, and we would be more than happy to figure out how to showcase to everyone great examples of how to do awesome accessibility work. But of course, as I mentioned, there is now a new accessibility testing service. At Xbox, we want to make sure that gaming is for everyone, and we know that we're lucky being part of Microsoft to be a large enough company to have resources to really help people. I mean, we know that over 1 billion of people in the world live with some sort of disability. And as we get older, we know that the demographics are only going to have more people with disabilities playing, which is why we think it's so important to not only work to follow the Xbox accessibility guidelines, but assist others in completing this journey. So we've actually developed a testing service that you can use that is based off the Xbox accessibility guidelines. So, like I said, this testing service, MGATS, the Microsoft Game Accessibility Testing Service, is an optional testing service for developers and publishers of games on Xbox and PC. We're very excited because this is both for pre-released and post-release games that can be tested. So whether you're getting ready to get your game out the door, or maybe it's already out and you're looking to figure out what to do in a future update, either way, you can send it to us. We built the test off all of the information in the guidelines, as I previously mentioned. So each test includes a list of concerns that were found, the documentation and resources from around the industry on helping you meet your game in terms of your accessibility goals. One of the other things is we have testers that we have specifically trained and incorporated the Trusted Tester certification, which is offered by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, I believe, to make sure that our testers are knowledgeable in the area. But even more importantly, we have testers with disabilities who are part of the testing process. Again, nothing about us without us. So these testers with disabilities will be able to work, test your product, and give firsthand feedback on what they are seeing and what they are having challenges with. Now, a little bit of information. This is being run by the same certification team that you're already working with as an a la carte service, so you're able to engage them. Just because it is coming from our certification team, if you're looking to get involved, doesn't mean that you have to wait until you're about to cert. Please feel free, as soon as you have something that you're able to send, to work with your team to get us something that we'll be able to test for you. We have 2 tiers of costs that you can get in contact with us to find out about, and they are based off the size of the title, essentially. So we have simple titles, which is a title with essentially a single game mode and no multiplayer communication features. And then we have what we call the advanced testing for advanced titles, which are titles with multiple game modes and/or multiplayer communication features. Now, like I said, the testing are being done based off the Xbox accessibility guidelines. And when we are done, you will get a report with the accessibility highlights, any concerns, the gamers with disabilities feedback, and again, any list of resources that we have that we're able to provide. As we're doing this, one of the big things as we're working to do is drive down the cost as much as we can. We're currently providing this at no cost, at cost essentially, so that you guys are literally just paying to have us pay our testers, because we believe that accessibility should be available to everyone. And so anything we can do to help you guys get in touch with accessibility experts and testers with disabilities is exactly what we want to do. And so really, the key takeaways from all of today: you can find the new Xbox accessibility guidelines at aka.ms/XAGS. Please feel free to contact us with questions, comment, feedback, examples at xaccess@microsoft.com. And don't forget that we have this new testing service available. The communication lines you already have open for CERT are the ones that you're going to be able to use. And Caitlin, I again want to thank you so much for coming here today, for sharing all of the awesome knowledge and all of the work that you put in.
Thanks so much, Tara, and I hope everyone tuning in has a great GameStock Live.